Humans, a brief history of how we fucked it all up. As humanity, we have never been humble. That's why we called ourselves Homo sapiens, meaning wise man or knowing man. This confidence is actually our species' most distinct feature. However, Tom Phillips's book slaps us in the face with the reality that our history isn't a display of brilliance, but rather a series of fiascos by a clumsy species that survived by sheer luck. Our story isn't a success story. It is, more accurately, the tragicomic drama of a species that constantly shoots itself in the foot, but somehow manages to keep limping forward. It all started when we split from our evolutionary cousins and stood up on two legs. And probably one of the first things we did was fall down. In fact, bone analysis of our ancestor Lucy shows she died falling from a tree. So technically, human history began with a faceplant. But the problem isn't that we fall. The problem is our capacity to get back up and say, "I meant to do that. I have a great idea." Our brains evolved to keep us alive, not to find the truth. For our ancestors, it was safer to mistake a rustle in the bushes for a lion and run, rather than thinking it was just the wind. This pattern recognition ability saved lives back then, but today it drags us into conspiracy theories, superstitions, and false cause and effect relationships. That is why the biggest disasters in history didn't stem from malice, but from overconfident stupidity. Because people usually trust themselves most in the subjects they know the least about. The point where this overconfidence meets nature is a total disaster zone. We consider the agricultural revolution the beginning of civilization, but in reality, we condemned ourselves to a single food source, epidemics, and endless toil. Coming to more recent history, whenever we tried to bring nature to its knees with engineering marvels, nature always raised the stakes. When the Soviet Union diverted rivers to irrigate cotton fields, they wiped the Aral Sea, the world's fourth largest lake, off the map. All that remained were toxic dust storms and rusting ships in the middle of a desert. But perhaps the most iconic example of a war against nature happened in China. Mao Zedong declared war on sparrows because they ate crops. Millions of people banged pots and pans to exhaust the birds until they fell to the ground and died. The Four Pests campaign was a success. The sparrows were gone. But they hadn't accounted for the bugs and locusts the sparrows used to eat. Without sparrows, insects infested the fields, leading to one of history's greatest famines, and millions of people lost their lives simply because someone pressed the ecosystem's delete button. We didn't just mess up nature, we scrambled geography too. Humans created biological disasters by saying, "What if we take this from here and put it there?" A man named Eugene Schieffelin brought starlings to America just because they were mentioned in Shakespeare's plays. A handful of birds have now invaded all of North America. The 24 rabbits brought to Australia for hunting fun turned into a billion-strong army that destroyed the continent's vegetation. Humans possess a universal talent for acting without considering the consequences. When it comes to leadership and governance, the situation is even grimmer. History books talk about great commanders, but Phillips shows us the flip side of the coin. Hitler was far from a strategic genius. He was indecisive, a drug addict, and a leader who slept until noon. The Habsburg dynasty, on the other hand, intermarried so much to keep power within the family that when King Charles II of Spain was born, he was a genetic wreck. His jaw wouldn't close, he couldn't speak, and he couldn't walk. The effort to create pure blood drove them to extinction. Even in wars, the enemy wasn't always on the other side. In 1788, the Austrian army experienced the weirdest event in history at the Battle of Caransebes. In the darkness of night and under the influence of alcohol, they mistook their own soldiers for Ottomans and attacked each other. They suffered about 10,000 casualties. When the Ottoman army arrived at the scene, there was nothing left to do. The war had already ended by itself. However, in the race for the name who individually damaged the world the most, Thomas Migley Jr. is the hands-down winner. This engineer added lead to gasoline to solve engine knocking. The result? He poisoned the entire global atmosphere with lead and caused a permanent drop in children's IQ levels. As if that wasn't enough, he invented Freon gas, CFCs, for refrigerators and drilled a hole in the ozone layer. A single human, starting out with good intentions, brought the world to the brink of extinction twice. Ironically, after becoming paralyzed, Migley was strangled to death by the ropes of a pulley system he invented to help himself get out of bed. Being killed by his own invention was perhaps the most fitting end to his legacy. Colonial history is also full of similar lack of vision. Scotland invested its entire wealth in the Darien scheme in Panama with dreams of ruling world trade. However, they brought woolen clothes and wigs for a tropical climate. Disease, hunger, and poor planning bankrupted Scotland, causing it to lose its independence and forcing it to unite with England. Today's map of Great Britain is actually the result of a bad investment decision. So, despite all these disasters, wars, environmental massacres, and acts of stupidity, why are we still here? According to Tom Phillips, the answer is simple. Either we are tougher than we think, or we are incredibly lucky. Human history looks like the story of a drunk man walking on the edge of a cliff, regaining his balance at the very last moment every time. The lesson the book gives us is clear. Yes, we went to the moon, split the atom, and built the internet. But at the same time, we drilled the ozone, fought with ourselves, and crashed the ecosystem. Our survival in the future will depend not on how smart we are, but on how well we can rein in our own stupidity. Because we no longer hold spears. We hold nuclear weapons and AI. And the next history glitch might be our last.